I'm coming to you today with a cowboy hat on because I've got a big fat zit on my forehead and I don't feel like looking at that in my little monitor over here or on that monitor when I am editing this later. As the moment of this filming, I am not sure what my clickbaity title is, but hopefully it was intriguing enough that you are here watching this now. With that said, hi, my name is Brendan. Thank you so much for joining me here, and today's video is a response to a comment I got on my last video, which, by the way, thank you so much for your engagement with. That was super awesome to get those email notifications about all the new comments and likes that I was getting on that. Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. With that said, that video was a critique on a few different companies that offer services that prioritize convenience and market themselves as solutions to problems that I consider to be problematic, and I think the use of these services robs people the chance to develop some very awesome skills of their own, and also robs them a chance of building up their very essential sense of self-confidence. And one of the comments I got was something to the effect of, I don't think you have empathy for people with autism or ADHD who may rely on such services. And I think this comment was coming in good faith. I do think there was some defensiveness in this comment as well, and this is not an attack on this person. However, I do have some opinions about this comment and comments that I see like this on the internet broadly, and that is what this video is about. So, first of all, I am so empathetic. Not gonna explain how or why, I just am. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. Look at me. Empathy. I don't know. I had a gag lined up, but I lost it. Second of all, I am diagnosed ADHD, and I don't appreciate this insinuation that people who are neurodivergent are unilaterally granted a social exemption from trying to better themselves and trying to take agency over their own lives. Obviously, if one is so neurodivergent that they are incapable of literally staying alive and cooking for themselves, well, then they can go ahead and keep their Factor subscription. That video is not for that specific type of person. I am not presenting myself as some kind of old Norse dad who's decided his milk-drinking son is an embarrassment and dropped him on a mountainside and said, come back with the heart of a bear, otherwise you're dead to me. That's not what I'm doing, and I think it's kind of crazy to me that that was one of the interpretations one could pull from that video. But I know I'm not the greatest wordsmith, and I'm not going to pretend that I presented the best, most clearly laid out video, but still, I find that really interesting that a broad sense of just trying to encourage people to take ownership of the things that they can was perceived as unempathetic and as an attack on neurodivergent behaviors and people. I think that's really interesting. And on that note, when I see neurodivergence being brought up in either conversations in my personal life or just on the internet broadly, in videos, content, whatever, it is 80% of the time brought up as an excuse for behavior. And I think that's really worrying, and I think continuing to normalize this as sort of an immutable, unassailable social crutch is going to do us a lot of harm in the long term, and I hope you'll let me explain why before you guys cancel me. I only have 100 subscribers, so I guess it wouldn't be the longest fall from grace, but I feel compelled to make this video, so here I am. I don't like this assumption that if you have a neurodivergent diagnosis, it's like a death sentence. I don't like this sort of infantilizing that comes with comments like this. Like I said before, this is not, that video and this video are not for people that are clearly incapable of engaging with the social contract meaningfully. And that video is definitely applicable, I think, to most people, even if you're not neurodivergent or whatever. I don't like this infantilizing that comes with neurodivergence and discussion about neurodivergence. I think you can be autistic and have ADHD and can improve your life. I think you deserve that chance. Maybe there's a small portion of people that truly cannot overcome their symptoms, and that is regrettable and unfortunate. But I don't think, one, that's most people, and two, I don't think that should disqualify them from trying if they want to. Why is that? Why is ADHD, why is a neurodivergent diagnosis that become this sort of invulnerability shield and just a complete deflective social tool for behavior? I think that's such a problem. And I feel very strongly about this because I managed to live most of my life, 31 years, without realizing that I was neurodivergent. I got my ADHD diagnosis in early 2024, and it was a very tumultuous time in my life. It was met with a lot of conflicting emotions. There was a sense of relief that there wasn't necessarily something wrong with my moral character. I wasn't like a lazy, unmotivated, incapable person. It was just a belief set that had been set in place by me not understanding why I behaved the way that I behaved. And there was some anger as well that so much of my life could have maybe happened differently had I been diagnosed earlier, but regret is a useless emotion, so I try not to dwell on that too much. And a bit of sadness, a bit of melancholy about the whole thing as well. But looking back, that is definitely one of the best things that ever happened to me because it finally gave me an explanation for many components of why my life looked and felt the way that it did. And fast forward a year after therapy, after behavior management and occasional medication, I would not be diagnosable as ADHD at this point. My symptoms are pretty well managed, and it is something that I have to keep up on, and it's something that I have to be mindful of. But for the most part, my symptoms do not impact my life so greatly anymore. And I'm not here trying to insinuate that my journey is everyone's journey. Everyone has a different path to the ideal life that they're trying to live. But I am so grateful that I was in an environment where people were encouraging me to engage with my diagnosis as sort of rules for engagement as opposed to a blanket social permission to just continue exactly as I was. So often I see a neurodivergent diagnosis being used as a justification to cease growth in either a social sense, in a personal sense, and I think it's gonna negatively impact your life if you're one of these people that uses it in that way. And I think if you are also bothered by this trend, I think it's important to start speaking up about it, because I think part of the reason why this is allowed to become so widespread is this general sense of people being afraid to be canceled or being afraid of being perceived as unempathetic. And again, I am sort of amazed that I was perceived in that way and somebody felt strongly enough about that to leave a comment about that. I think that's wild. You know, I think we have to put aside this instinct to have an excuse, because it's gonna kill us all. No, it's not. But your symptoms are manageable and your diagnosis is not a death sentence. So just real quick, in the interest of not being perceived as unempathetic, again, I am not insinuating my journey is going to be everyone's. And yes, I have been extremely fortunate with the support network that I was able to take advantage of. But with that said, I think we have to stop infantilizing neurodivergence. And if you find yourself using your diagnoses as a social crutch, I want you to ask yourself why. I'm not so shocked as to how this became so widespread. I think there's a sort of natural instinct, I think, to take the path of least resistance. I think that's what humans are designed to do. And if there is a social rule you can take advantage of, or even a legal loophole in certain situations as to make your life a little bit easier, then I think most people will do that. And I think a ADHD diagnosis or an autism diagnosis presents itself as that to certain people. And I think that's totally a human nature type of thing. But again, maybe that explains it, but it doesn't excuse it. And I think we're in a situation for at least the next 4 years, but possibly the rest of our adult lives, are going to be extremely difficult. And if I can do anything for anyone in this next era of the world, I hope it's to instill a sense of how essential a sense of confidence and agency is. Because a lot of things are going to be happening that makes us all feel like we have no control over anything that's happening, and I just want to present a perspective where no, you do have control, and it's important to fight the battles that you can and become the strongest version of you possible, because not only are you going to be able to rely on yourself, but people in your life will also need to rely on you. And I want you to be as well prepared and as emotionally equipped as possible to be there for the people that may need you when the time comes. Not to get too doomer or apocalyptic on you, but it has to be said. And just an additional aside on maybe why this became so widespread, I think TikTok and other highly consumable content has presented autism and ADHD as a sort of quirky, fun thing, and as sort of a shoe-in for a personality for certain people. And there's a ton of people self-diagnosing for the sake of being a part of what they perceive to be like a quirky community. And that's very sad for a number of reasons, which I don't know if I want to get into all of that. But I do think that is partly what has contributed to this phenomenon. But with all that said, again, I'm not trying to come at anybody. I just have to come out and say, I hope that we can stop picking up pitchforks on behalf of people that are not a monolith, that don't necessarily want to be granted these unilateral exemptions, and just assuming a bit of good faith with a critique or a suggestion as far as different behavior goes. And the last thing I'll say is just sort of a quick tie into the last video. Even if you really do rely on external services that help make your life easier, we live in a capitalist hellscape, and there's literally nothing guaranteeing, no government program, no social program, that will ensure that these services will remain in operation forever. And if you are, again, a neurodivergent person and you rely on these services and they suddenly vanish, what will you do then? You know, I don't want you to starve, and even if you hate cooking for yourself, even if you experience debilitating sensory issues on eating something that isn't a Factor chicken nugget, I still think it's worth it to try, and I still think it's worth it for you to push yourself, even if you do find yourself in that specific situation. And again, I know people like this. I know people with sensory issues, and they still endeavor to cook for themselves, and they work to manage their symptoms in such a way as to minimize the disruptions it has on their daily life. And I know it's possible. Again, I've managed to effectively control my ADHD symptoms, and I don't think there's any reason why you can't try to do the same. I don't think that's such a controversial opinion. I don't think it's one lacking in empathy. And I'm just this feeling, this sort of biting my tongue feeling has been weighing on me for a really long time. And I just may as well get it off my chest while hardly anyone is watching. So anyway, that's it. That's my big call to action. Something that I am curious to know, if you are watching this and you are neurodivergent, I would be really curious to know what your journey has been from diagnosis to where you are now, and what are some of the things that helped you manage those symptoms. And if you do have a symptom management strategy that you think is applicable for more than just yourself, I would encourage you to share it. But that's it. Thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully I'm not about to get canceled. Bye.